Welcome to season 4. I am your host Bruce, and this is still SOAPBOX. Of course, we just wrapped our season, I think a month or two ago, and I know you perhaps didn't anticipate to see me this soon. We had expected to come back for season 4 in September or October, but we're here. I know it's also a shock for some of you to actually see me. So for those of you who kept suggesting maybe you should do a video, I am trying it. No commitment. I can't tell you all that went into to just putting it together. And so if you see me, those of you who are viewing, if you see me looking at the camera sometimes and then looking at the actual podcasting equipment, I apologize, but it really can't be helped. And so to those of you in the podcast community in the region, I know it is small but growing. Thank you very much for staying with us, listening to us for what is now the fourth season. And to those of you who've been going to our website, following us on social media, thank you, thank you, thank you. And of course, to those of you who listen and seem to love the spin-off podcast, Soca or Die, thank you again. But we are in season 4. We had to begin season 4 a lot earlier than anticipated, but this is 2020 and not much else has gone according to plan this year. So you know what they say, man plan, God laughs. So we started earlier because I think even though we typically take a little longer between seasons, with the election being called earlier than anticipated, I felt it necessary to come back sooner. As you may know or remember, in Trinidad and Tobago, the last election, general election, was held in September 7th, I believe it was 2015. And so, of course, it is for a 5-year term. For those of you who may not know, the Constitution allows for 5 years from the date of the first sitting of the Parliament after election. And then after that 5 years, Parliament must prorogue or be dissolved. And then from the date of dissolution of Parliament, then you have 3 months, if you want to call it a grace period, within which to call elections. Of course, the Constitution also allows for the leader of the government, the person who commands the majority in the House, in the House of Representatives, that is, to dissolve Parliament sooner than that 5-year term. And so here we are. The election date was announced July the 3rd, and it was announced to be August 10th, with a little over a month of campaigning. I think perhaps, again, we did not anticipate it because around the region, and typically leaders try to exact their 5-year term. And then in the last election in Trinidad and Tobago, we know that our last prime minister took it right up to that deadline, right up to that grace period. We saw in Barbados as well, Frondel Stewart doing the same thing right up to the election, right up to the term. There is a level of sometimes not folklore but superstition in terms of calling an early election or calling a late election, but we're not going to get into that. I am welcoming you to season 4. That is the business that we're doing here today. Nonetheless, a number of people expected that by, say, September or between September and December 2020 that we would have the election, but here we are in August. Again, I am perhaps a little bit thankful because the pandemic maybe made for a lot of idle hands on social media, and definitely in Trinidad and Tobago we've seen a lot of craziness, a lot of behavior that we probably would not have seen had it not been for the pandemic and having a lot of time on our hands. And so I was particularly worried about a lengthy campaign period. I know in St. Kitts, St. Kitts and Nevis, those of you who might have been following regional politics, again, I believe it was 3 weeks for election campaigning. The Prime Minister there called a snap election, and snap not just like, oh, we're going to dissolve Parliament, but snap as in, listen, dissolve today, election 3 weeks from now. So I'm a little thankful for a shorter campaign period. Let's contract silly season into just maybe a month of the nonsense, and then we can get back to post COVID recovery and how we move forward as a country. But should we really be surprised? As I mentioned in the While You Were Inside episode last season, season 3, once you see a ruling party or the party that is or commands the majority in the House, the Prime Minister, his party or her party, once you see them starting to screen candidates, you know that something is about to happen. Once you see them starting to publish, not just, oh, well, we screening candidates under wraps and then the media happen to get a hold of it. Once you see that they are actively putting this information out into the public, then we know that the campaign wheels are turning and that they are readying themselves for a campaign. And not only that, but we also know that it is an election year, so we know it coming. And I think that should have been signal enough to all the other parties. Okay, let's start this thing. Let's get ready. Without a fixed election date, the selection and announcement of an election date has always been a matter of political strategy. So again, I've been seeing some discussions on social media and they like about the election date, and again, Trinidadians call the election now, but oh gosh, how you gonna call the election now? This kind of discussion about the date itself and all that kind of thing. But it has always been a matter of political strategy because, again, only the person who has the power to call the date knows when the date is. So, of course, it is, and it has become strategy. And whether intentionally, whether internally or externally propelled, whether, and when I say internally or externally, I mean whether or not they choose a date because of what is happening within the party, or whether or not they feel that this would give them the best chance of success, or whether or not they choose a date because of what is happening outside of the party or in the external environment in terms of the situation in Trinidad and Tobago, or the situation in the world. Again, these are things that any political strategist and anybody involved in politics, which political parties are, would take into consideration when selecting a date. So this discussion about, oh, they only call it because of the pandemic, we have to have election this year. so it's not about using it as an opportunity. At some point in 2020, when we would still be in a global pandemic, the election would have to come. But I digress. And as I was saying before, they would choose a date that is politically strategic or one based on superstition. And I alluded to some of these superstitions before, but one based on superstition, and announce that date at an opportune time. And why I say they would announce it at an opportune time is because, in my view, my humblest of opinion podcast community, I want to posit that while most political analysts talk about the date of the election, so in this case, August 10th, and they put a certain level of weight on August 10th, and rightfully so, because that's the date that we go to the polls. That's the date that it is concrete or concretized, the public's opinion. I want to suggest that perhaps equally as important, I don't know if I'll say more important as yet, but equally as important is the day that the election is announced. So August 10th is important because that is when we have the transfer. That is when John Public casts their ballot. But what happens on July 3rd, in this case, the date that it was announced, is that, in my opinion, you win or lose an election on that date. Why do I say that? While we want to pretend that campaigns matter in Trinidad and Tobago in particular, or in the Caribbean in particular, while we want to pretend that campaigns matter, and while we want to pretend like the cash in jerseys matter, let us be very real with ourselves. I think perhaps if it is anything that the soapbox asks you to do is to be very real. Does the campaign matter? Does it matter to you? I'm asking you, not anybody else, right? Not your neighbor. No, I'm asking you. Does the campaign matter? Do you listen to the campaigns? And I mean now, in the context of COVID-19, it is not so much a go to the rally and wine and jam and see artists, where you get something out of it. You have to actually tune into a rally. Even before this, how many of you, and I mean now we might be starved for entertainment, but before this in 2015, in 2010, you know, have you watched a political rally on TV? So not only that, but when you've watched it, did you watch a rally for a party that you did not support? Not only that, but if you get cash in a jersey, now let me stick a pin in this here, please, because I have several problems with elections. And my problem is that nobody does give me cash in jerseys. I don't know. I don't be in the right place at the right time. Let me also put it out there that I have never gotten a campaign jersey from nobody. Again, I don't know if I don't be in the right place at the right time or what. I have no party has ever saw it fit to give me a jersey. And as I've told my Facebook friends as well, these pollsters, when they publish polls in the newspaper, everybody have their polls. Natak and this one do a poll and Guardian do a poll. Like nobody never asks me nothing. So I don't know if I am chopped liver. I don't know if I am citizen 1,300,000 and something thousand, where I all the way down the list, because I would assume that with a last name like Bruce that I might be higher up, bees kind of higher up. No, nobody never asked me nothing. Nobody never give me anything. I never get a jersey. I never get money. So I'm just registering my disappointment here. Let me just put that on the record. But anyway, does it matter? That is the question. That's the real question I want to ask, and I want you to ask yourself, because long before we go to the polls, the majority of voters have already made up their minds. Tell my lie. And that is for better or for worse, whether you agree or you disagree. And it has nothing to do with, I want to dispel, and we'll come to that later, I want to dispel this thing about tribalism, but it has nothing to do, they have already made up their minds. Even I don't follow politics now, people, even those who, I don't care about parties, I don't care about politics, I don't, XYZ, they've already made up their minds, especially because we know that it's an election year and it's coming. I think subliminally we already start to process those messages. We already know that it's coming and we start to prepare ourselves mentally. The same way the EBC does have to prepare themselves physically or logistically, I think citizens already begin to prepare themselves, because those conversations start long before an election date is called. That's just again, like I said, I don't know, or I'm not going to hazard to say that it is more important than actual what actually happens on the 10th, or more important than August 10th. But when you declare an election, people's minds immediately go to, okay, switch A, B, C, or F. Okay, election is coming. Who do I vote for? Who do I choose? And then it's, I think, a situation of continuous confirmation bias. Maybe that's heights, I don't know. Right? This decision is not made for many in the month, or in our case, month and a half, or in St. Kitts, the 3 weeks, of campaign. I don't believe so. Subconsciously, for the 4 years prior, you would have been taking stock of what is happening. For those of you who might have been awake for more than 4 years, or in the last 10 years, in the last 15 years, you know, you'd have been subconsciously or consciously taking stock of what is happening. And I think those things weigh more heavily on the decision making than what happens in that month and a half window, or that however long the campaign period is. And yes, there are things that can happen during a campaign, things so dastardly, you know, you clutch your pearls like, oh my gosh. But again, to what extent do these, because we also place a lot of we also make suggestions, not suggestions, but suppositions, pardon me, in terms of things that come out during campaign time. Oh, it's just because they're trying to sully our name. Oh, it's just election gimmicks. Oh, it's just because. So the good and the bad are equally as ignored, I feel, again, because it's a series of confirmation bias. You've already mentally determined party A, party B, and so if something comes out against your preferred party, it's just because of the election. If something good happens for the other party, or something positive, oh, it's just a gimmick because it's elections. A series of confirmation bias, right? And again, this goes back to what I was asking. How many people have been swayed out of their opinion? And these polls, of course, they like to show undecided voters, right? I saw one, I think from The Guardian or somebody, undecided voters were, I think, about 15% or something like that. But I would like to really see the correlation in the polls between actual voters and non-voters, because your poll could tell me 50% of the public like this one, 40% like this one, and 10% undecided. But if the undecided don't go out and vote, then again, they remain undecided and their vote is not registered. So how does that materially affect our analysis, right? And particularly in this case where I said, more than likely, if you've been awake, you've been subconsciously taking stock of these things on all sides of the political spectrum, right? Which would have informed your decision perhaps long before, but jolted that decision to the forefront since July 3rd. And so you're really on a campaign to sway undecided voters, but are those undecided voters actually going to go out and vote? Maybe we should do a poll. I want to know, as at July 3rd, or even as at today's date, whatever date this is published, as at today's date, have you decided, or are you undecided? And is it your intention to vote? I think we will deal with this thing about intention to vote in another session, because, I feel very deeply about exercising your franchise. I feel very deeply about registering your vote and doing your civic duty. I feel very strongly about it, but we'll discuss that, I think, in another session. Anyway, and I know I saw as well this thing about debates. There are people who will subject themselves to debates, and there are those who would not. I think the day that we see a political debate or an election debate is going to be a good day in Trinidad and Tobago. However, in the context of my new hypothesis, I don't know if it will sway opinion. Maybe am I losing my optimism? But I don't know. I don't know how much a debate, again, when we go back to this thing about confirmation bias, you will still have the follow the leader. You will still have that. And not only that, but again, we hear so much from and about the leaders of the party, because when we want to say it is tribalism in terms of people are wedded to a particular party, that is one thing perhaps. We haven't fully yet addressed people wedded to a particular leader, right? because I think both of them go hand in hand. Is it the right party and is it the right leader for the party? And then we haven't yet come down to the constituency level where we discuss, is this candidate, not just the leader, the party, and not just the party, because you're checking two boxes, but the box that matters, right? That box of, is my candidate the best candidate to represent me? We haven't even gotten down to that. So leadership debates are great. I could predict how it would go, but but let's not go into that. Anyway, and back to my hypothesis, I believe that campaigns are always or almost always a rehashing of political history, because we know that we cannot hold them to anything that they say, and we know that anything that they posit at this time or the other is going to be a situation of political gimmicks, or it will be labeled as a political gimmick. I don't know if we will ever get to that discussion. I mean, we have manifestos. We've had manifestos in the past. Let me say, I don't know because I have not seen any manifesto this rounds, but I know in the last election we had manifestos from both of the main ruling parties. I can't remember if any of the other parties had produced a manifesto, but we had on both sides. Great. How many people read it? And how many people read the manifesto of the party that they were not going to vote for? Right? So I think that is why on the pulpit, on the political pulpit, on the campaign trail, there is always this rehashing of history, because we it might be more difficult to sell you on a future, particularly if that future is not something that is guaranteed or that we want to be tied to. And it is better to remind you of what you already know, because also Trinidadians, Trinbagonians, show me, right? All these things sound nice, but they believe in a track record, which is, I think, is partly what makes it difficult as well for new parties and incoming parties, right? And sometimes, let me tell you, it is a rehashing of political history, but sometimes it is good to remind people of where we have been in the past and the struggles that we've faced for the past how many ever odd years, right? So I think that while yes, tell us what you're going to do in the future, we want to see what is coming, we want to see, that sounds nice. It sounds nice to say that we are interested in that, but let us be real. We want to know what you do, right? How well you did it. We want that track record. We have a difficulty with starting things on a blank page. It's kind of like there is a problem, right? Everybody knows there's a problem. Nobody knows what the solution is. We know what the solution is not. And how we get to that is somebody has to throw themselves to the wolves and put out a suggestion. What if we, and then everybody will say, no, that's not what we should be doing. But if you leave the room quiet and say, okay, we have this problem, how do we fix it? Not a soul would hazard a guess. People prefer to discuss and debate and go round and round on what the problem is before we could even get to this talk about what the solution is. And I think that's the same thing that happens on political platforms, where we could suggest, we could say in the future we will, the public knows that we can't hold you to that, so why are you doing it? Again, you're gonna be shut down at every turn. How could you do that? You could say, oh, that don't make sense, ting, or we don't care, flat out. But if you say, when we did this, I think that is more impactful. And I mean, that's the same thing you do in a job interview. You could tell the interviewer all what you want to do in the future, and that's great, but they're not going to take it seriously until you said, you know what, I did this. I am capable of doing that. But I digress on that. It's supposed to be an introduction. Anyway, the sentiment for the parties that we felt when the election was announced is what, in my estimation, will carry over to the polls. Again, I don't know how these people, NACTA and whoever else, conduct their polls. I have not seen their survey methodology. I don't know, because I don't know if they just go up and say, and I don't know what time frame, when did they conduct these polls? How many people they survey, like who, how, when, where, why, but okay. But I don't know if they go up and say, okay, so who you're voting for, and then correlate that. I don't know. I don't know if it's proxy questions or direct. I don't know. But I believe that how you felt on July 3rd about the parties that are in the fray is what will carry into the polls. If you were upset with the administration on July 3rd, if you were so upset that you ain't feel like you will vote, then it is not going to happen. If you are so upset with the opposition where you feel like, you know, this don't make sense, then I feel like that will carry over into the polls. And that is my thing, which is again why it's politically opportune when you announce an election, because that sentiment you will never, you won't forget. You may not remember the date it was called, but you remember how you felt. Oh, election is August 10th. Well, if so by so feel that, then they have another thought coming, that kind of way. And I think this is also why it is difficult for new parties, and it's difficult for them to make a significant impact, because they start too late. They start too late, right? The public doesn't have sufficient time to assess how they feel about the party. And if I could use the example, I was trying not to use the example of Patriotic Front. We could even use the example of Third Force Movement in the last election, right? You see a readying of the ruling administration. You see candidates being screened on both sides. You cannot wait until the election date is announced to begin screening candidates. An election is due in the year 2020. After this election, one will be due, constitutionally in 2025. If you are a new party and you are waiting until 2025 to get your house in order, to determine how you're going to make payments in terms of deposits, if you're going to deposit for the electoral candidates, that is, just to clarify, if you are waiting until 2025 to determine who is your slate of candidates, who is your, to get your house in order, to have bylaws and organize your party, then you are already too late. I think this is a strategy that, and not necessarily a strategy, but the kind of foresight that the MSJ had in terms of, listen, it's not an election year, it's immediately after an election. We are dissatisfied or we want change. Let us be on the grind. Let us be in the public domain. Let us be commenting on things. The challenge that they would have is this issue of not having a track record, not being able to serve. They cannot demonstrate their service, because again, it will always be a case of them just doing that because they want to be in the papers, or them just doing that because, but we've never actually seen their leadership. And as I said before, Trinidadians are very much see to believe. But at least they have a name, and they have a name recognition, right? If you are waiting until 2025 to get your affairs in order, you are not going, because we don't know you. We don't know you. We don't know your position on things, right? We don't know your ideas. We haven't heard you. We don't know where you fall. And so to ask us to vote for you, to place our trust in you, even if we feel like these two parties ain't worth nothing, or even if we feel like we're fed up, we're tired, we can't do anymore. That's why people always say around election, they pick the lesser of two evils, or they pick the devil that they know is better than the devil that you don't know, because you don't know what you will get. And that is a real and legitimate concern of voters that should not be dismissed by oh, they should just try. No, because I mean, I was going to equate it to, say trying a new ice cream flavor, but still that would be to diminish the responsibility and diminish what we're actually doing. Because if you set up yourself, you're going on, you like vanilla, or you're going and buy vanilla ice cream, there is nothing that would change your mind, right? Or if you've never tried it before, what are the conditions under which you would try chocolate ice cream? And like I say, that is even making it, that is diminishing the seriousness of it, because at the end of the day, if you don't like the ice cream, you could throw it away. But if you don't like what you get when you try something new in the realm of politics, then it could have dire consequences. So I think that is the challenge, and we cannot just equate it to tribalism. I think that is a little bit offensive. It's not just tribalism. And again, as a social scientist, as people who study human behavior and human interaction, you have to understand, how people behave and how people act. And so all I'm saying is that as a new or upcoming party, you have to do some legwork. You can't just throw up candidates and expect people to fall behind them. You have to do that much more work. Is it fair, or is it I don't know what else, but I think it is so. And not only that, but remember, even at the beginning, where the two stalwart parties began is because they had a base of support, right? Being born out of the unions and born out of mass movement, they have a base of support, a critical mass of support, which would propel them to the national stage. And so if you are starting a political party, you cannot just say, well, sit down in your living room and decide, well, yeah, I want to think, but where is your base of support? And are they going to show up for you? Why am I preaching? I am not sure. But it just struck me as maybe a lazy argument to say, oh, people don't want change, which is why they don't give new parties a chance. No, there's a lot more to it, right? The public doesn't have time to assess how they feel, when the election is called, because again, July 3rd, right? And you're doing your, like I said, you're doing your snap assessment, you're doing the working in your head. Did the patriotic front pop to the front of your mind? Did you say, oh gosh, but wait, what happened to these people? Perhaps not. Did you say, oh, where is, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a unknown or unnamed party that has not been brought into existence yet? No. Where is the SALT movement? You don't know. You're not thinking, okay, I wonder if these people is real, because you have not heard, you have not seen, and they haven't done the legwork to imprint them in your brain. Right? And so, like I said, I'm sure that your mind went to the most likely outcome. You probably didn't even consider some of these what is the word that I wanted to say? Undesirable. Some of these, I'm trying to be diplomatic here, podcast community. You probably didn't consider some of the parties, quote unquote, that are suggesting that they are serious but don't behave in a serious manner. If you catch my drift, those things probably already cancelled out. But anyway, right? They don't have the track record, so they have to do that much more in terms of getting out in front of you. And it is those small pieces of information, and sometimes those large events as well, which is why when we do this political rehashing, they're always bringing up call the scandal. They're always bringing up X, or they're always bringing up Y. Of course, because those things leave an indelible mark in your brain, right? And those are the things that when you think election, when you think politics, when you think leadership, those are some of the first things. We are human. But anyway, it is those things, right? Those big and small things over the last 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever, however far back your political consciousness goes, right? Whether accurate or not, let me also put that out there, because sometimes the large and small events that we call to mind may not be grounded in any fact, and they may not have been proven, but or the pieces of information may not be accurate, because how we see the situation could be very much different to how others see it, or how it in fact was. But it is, it is that kind of thing that makes our decision, like I said, long before we get to the polls. I don't know, but if you find somebody who on August 10th is in the line, although it is an offense to ask people that. But if any of you who would like to give an account of your experience, if on August 10th you are unsure about who to vote for, or you are in the line and you still uncertain, I just want to know, again, so I don't want to know who or why or how. I just want to know if there is anybody in this country who is unsure come August 10, unsure and still going to the polls. I don't know. I've never seen it or heard of it, but again, I digress. This is supposed to be an introduction. I believe that we may have gone past our 30-minute mark. I promised, I promised my some of my background people that we will try to keep it to 30 minutes this season, and let me tell you, we did not do that. I can already tell you, because as you know, we would have recorded our Energy 101 episode. Yes, it is something that I've been wanting to do for quite some time, because I saw the comments, I saw the discussions, I saw the articles, and it was evident that in Trinidad and Tobago, despite being an oil and gas based economy, not everybody knew, or not everybody was up to scratch in terms of basic. And I mean, when I tell you basic, we went right down to the bare bones, and I'm very happy for that. And it was not 30 minutes. I apologize. I don't know, there will be no video. I don't know if I will do a sort of presentation style video for that one, but I already recorded it long before, and I was in preparation for a September, October start to season 4, but I already recorded it, and I got Andrew Hussain to assist me with that. He's an energy sector expert, a young person, so excited about getting that to y'all. We will this season delve deeper into this thing about elections, because to be very honest, in season 3 I wanted to chat with you about local government elections. The time and the situation did not allow for me to do that then. I might do it again in a future season, but this season we will deal with general elections. So we will delve deeper into that in terms of voting and doing your civic duty, as well as look at the information and analysis that we base our decisions on. And I mean, I gave you my hypothesis, but it doesn't mean that I do not support the need for critical data and information and accurate data upon which people should base their opinions. I'm still a staunch believer of that. If after you've had all the information, all the lived experience, and all the whatever else, you still decide to ignore it and go where the wind blows, that's up to you. But I feel like information should be readily available to people, and we'll delve deeper into that in another episode. Would we do an election recap? I've already mapped out the season, to be very honest. I did consider it. I even considered going live. One of my friends suggested that I do a live session. I'm not a camera person. The thought of doing a live session is very daunting to me. Just to get me here to do this was a task, but okay. Perhaps maybe on August 11th, we might do a sit down panel with young people as well to give their perspectives in terms of the results, and discuss some of the trends, some of their predictions, and do a sort of post-mortem on the election. Maybe that's what we would do. Let me tell you, my blood pressure cannot take ballot counting. It cannot. Typically, I take my 2 hours at the end of my workday. My constitutionally or legally allowed 2 hours. And if your employer is preventing you from taking your time off to go and vote, that is an offense. They could be convicted. I think they can serve up to 12 months in prison for that. Different story. Anyway, I take my 2 hours at the end of my workday because my polling station is close to my home. So I go vote, I go home, right? I have an early dinner, I prepare for bed, I say my prayers, I light my candle, and I try to go to sleep by 7:30, 8 p.m. latest, before any election coverage or counting begins. All right, that's typically what I do. But perhaps on the 11th we can do something. As I said before, I'm particularly excited about the energy sector episode, so you will get that in mid-season. We did have to split it up into 3 parts, and recognize that even though this is energy sector 101, as I call it, or basics of the energy sector, it still took 3 episodes just to cover the basics. And so I want to thank Andrew Hossain, who sat with me on that. Again, another young person, expert in the energy sector. So he answered all of the questions that you asked on Facebook and much more. I know at the end of the last season, I promised the youth season that was supposed to be season 4. However, because of the election, we had to bring up this season, and so that will now be season 5. But we are still working on it, and I'm still gathering the interviews. Anyway, this was supposed to be an introduction, and we got into way more than I anticipated. But I can't wait to get into season 4 with you. Thank you. We've made it to season 4. As I always say, the little engine that could. And we are still available, podcast family, on all of your favorite platforms: SoundCloud, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Facebook, and also on our website, www.soapboxpodcast soapboxpodcast.com. Of course, leave us a comment or feedback on your thoughts on the episodes, on what you want us to get into on the soapbox. So if you want to be on the soapbox, you have something that you are passionate about, or that you want to get off your chest, send us a comment, or send us a direct message if you're on Facebook. And remember as well that in this season, the most effective way, if you're in Trinidad and Tobago, the most effective way for you to get on your soapbox is if you go out and vote.